Hey everybody, my name is Mike. I'm an addict. First of all, I want to thank the committee at the United Wasatch area of Narcotics Anonymous for asking me to come and speak to you. It's my pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure for me to speak anywhere in Narcotics Anonymous. I want to welcome the newer people to Narcotics Anonymous. And more importantly for me, I want to thank those predecessors who were here before me to set the way so that something was here when I finally got done. When I got to the end of the road, somebody was here, doors were open, coffee was made, and they welcomed me. I've spoken a lot of places, and every time I speak, I never tell the war stories. You know, if you're an addict, you know what it's like to use. You know what it's like to hurt. You know what it's like to try to get clean, maybe stay clean for whatever reason, and get loaded again. So I'm going to jump to the end of my story where I'm released from prison. But by the way, before I go any further, let me tell you my clean date. And this is a message of Narcotics Anonymous, so I say my clean date, not my ANDA. My clean date is June 14th, 1990. So thank you. I am here, guys. And I'm only here because of Narcotics Anonymous, a God of my understanding, and the 12 steps. So at the end of my using, I spent many of my years in prison. I got clean and did all my using, majority of my using in California. I saw the majority of the prisons there, Tehachapi, Folsom, Chino, the typical prison tours. The last time I was in, I got out. And you know what? The weird thing about it was when I was in prison the last time, I knew I was done. I just couldn't use again. I couldn't do this thing again. I got tired of my life being this repetitive story. Chapter 1, Mike gets high, Mike loses everything, Mike goes to prison. Chapter 2, Mike gets out of prison, Mike stays clean for a little bit, gets a few things in life, things are going well, Mike uses, Mike goes to prison, Mike loses everything, and so you fast forward 30 chapters, here I am getting out of prison one more time. And I knew I was done. And it was weird because when I was in prison the last time, one of my bunkmates, he was doing some time over his ninth step, making amends. In order to make that amends, the judge said, you need to go do some time. And he was sitting there talking to me about, recovery. Now, I had just the only exposure I had to Narcotics Anonymous was this last time in prison when the guys would show up. And of course, I would go to the meetings because they brought in donuts, cookies, cigarettes, things that I needed. And they would talk, tell me their story about, where they were in their life. And I sat there the whole time thinking, yeah, you probably need something like this because you just can't control it. I don't need this. I don't need what you guys have. Anyway, this bunkmate talked about how his sponsor is going to pick him up at, midnight, the night they kicked us to the gate. And I thought, well, cool, man. He's going to pick you up. He's going to take you to a meeting. That's probably what you need. I don't need that because I can control it now. I've had some time under my belt, not using it here. I'll be fine. So he gets out. His sponsor picks him up. They kicked me off at the bus station. And the weird thing about it was at the bus station, right across the street was a liquor store. So, that's not my problem. It's the other shit I do. That's the problem. So, I go get me some and I'm taking the bus ride back and I don't know anybody anymore. I just know my old friends, but I'm not going to use around them this time. I'm reformed, I'm not saying I was as reformed as some people who found Jesus in prison, but I was reformed. And it's like I show up and I was there maybe an hour. Somebody says, who wants to get loaded? And just as easy as breathing in and breathing out after all that time, I said, I do. That was a Friday. Between Friday and Monday, I was loaded the whole time. And what happened was, and I don't know how to explain this, other than a spiritual experience or something on that effect, was late Sunday night, early Monday mornings, how we are, one day runs into the next. I had this vision of where my life was going again. And the only thing I could say was, God help me, please. I can't do this anymore. And the next day, it's like, I was looking at the paper and I saw, in the classifieds. Back then, we didn't have the internet. I know that's probably really hard for some people to believe. We didn't have phones where you could just, pull up an application and say, oh, there's a meeting there. So the only way we had to say, hey, meetings were here, meetings were there, were in the classified section of the newspaper. And it said, Narcotics Anonymous meeting, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, such and such time, such and such place. And the thought thing came to me that maybe these people can help me. I went to my very first Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and, here I am, East LA, probably the only white guy in the meeting. And, they run the meeting like everybody else does, and they say, is there anybody new here? Never been to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. I raise my hand, yeah. Say, who are you? My name's Mike. What are you? I'm looking around the room, a lot of Latinos, a lot of African Americans. I go, Irish American, I guess. And they go, no, are you an addict? It's like, I don't know if I am or not, but I'm willing to come in here and give it a try. So I went to my first meeting, and of course, your first meeting, these guys come up and they want to give you a hug. These guys are all tatted down. I'm thinking, just 5 days ago, I'm getting out of the pen. I ain't playing this game on the outside, So it's like, they welcomed me to Narcotics Anonymous, and they told me, okay, you got to do some things here. Now this is the days when newcomers, and how it works in what is Narcotics Anonymous program. That last paragraph says, we don't care how much you used, who your connections were, how much, how little you have, only what you want to do about your problem and how we can help. And what they told me was, how you interpret that, Mike, is you tell us what your problem is, you sit down, you shut up, and you listen. Okay. You see, but I had this ego about me. I knew more than anybody else in that room. But, it's like the yeah, buts. Yeah, but you don't know me. Yeah, but I'm different. But it's like, they didn't take, there was no sugarcoating it back then. You sat down, if you wasn't going to sit down and listen, they basically wouldn't kick you out of the meeting, but they would take you outside and talk to you one-on-one, and sort of explain how this thing works. But so they told me, they said, Mike, you got to find a sponsor. You go to 90 meetings in 90 days. Okay, what's a sponsor? A sponsor is somebody who has what you want in life. Okay, I can do that. I can do the 90 in 90s. I'm not working. I'm currently homeless, so it's like I can do whatever. And so it's like I start going to meetings. I start watching people. I'm sitting outside a meeting one night. This guy comes pulling up in a brand new Corvette. Nice. He gets out of the Corvette, walks around the car, opens the door to this beautiful woman. I'm thinking, double nice. That's what I want. I wanted his car and his woman. And so after the meeting, I talked to him. I said, Charles, you have what I want. I want your car and I want your old lady. He said, you can have the car, but you ain't getting the old lady. He might say something different now, but I don't know. But Charles had on the front of that vet a license plate. And that license plate said 12 SODMF. Charles, what does your license plate mean? How long you been clean, Mike? 7, 8 days, 10 days. You're not even nowhere near knowing what that means. You go to meetings 30 days straight, and we'll talk about what that means. Okay, I can do that. So 30 days later, it's like, Charles, I've been clean for 30 days. I got my key tag here. See, 30 days clean. What does your license plate mean? He said, 12 SODMF. And anybody who's new, who got a book, you're going to see inside the front cover where I wrote 12 SODMF, my name and my recovery date. He said, what that stands for is 12 steps or die, motherfucker. That was his philosophy. That's how I was raised at Narcotics Anonymous. You work the steps or you die. I've been around long enough to see a lot of us addicts die. Now, I have no control over that. But all I had to do was work the steps if I wanted to live. And he started me through the steps. We started at step 1. We admitted we were powerless over our addiction. It didn't say, Mike, you are powerless. It says, you were powerless. I admitted I was powerless. So, which tells me that I cannot work step 1 if I'm still using. I can only work step 1 after I quit, because I have to admit I was powerless. I had to look at not being able to control it. Not being able to save that wake up. Anybody else relate to that? Having that wake up, I'm just going to set this aside on the table here, so when I wake up in the morning, I'm not sick. Middle of the night, it's gone, man. It didn't matter if I was going on vacation, I was going out of town. I took enough for 4 or 5 days, and it was gone in 2 days. I was powerless. Anytime anybody put anything in front of me, I would use it. That first step was all about honesty for me, about getting honest with myself. Not about telling him, being honest with him, saying, yes, I can't use blah, blah, blah. But it's admitting to my innermost self, I cannot use and control it. My life was evident of that. My life was unmanageable. I was living in a friend's van. He had a custom van. He would let me stay there in the back of that. But the thing was, he'd been burned by me so many times. He's like, Mike, you can't come in the house. You're welcome to sleep here. You can't be here before 10 o'clock at night, and you have to be out before 7 a.m. That's how powerless, that's how unmanageable my life was. My life used to be managed by the California Penal Institution, by the probation, by the parole officers. Everybody managed my life because of the narcotics. So it wasn't real hard for me to see where it took my life. When we come to the end of the road, when we cannot function no longer as human beings, I had to find something different. We talked about step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now, I think this step is here for me because if we stopped at step 1 of how my life was messed up, how I could not control anything, and that was the end of it, I admitted it, I would be like saying, oh shit. Step 2 comes in and gives me hope. That I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. That gives me hope that maybe I can be different. That maybe I can change. That this insane life I'm living can somehow be sane. Now, my definition of sanity and insanity is pretty clear to me. My definition of insanity is not being able to tell the difference between true and false. And sane is being able to tell the difference between true and false. In other words, if I'm living insane, what I think is false, what is false, I will think is true. Like, I can go around the old buddies again. Yeah, that's cool. That's true. I can go shoot pool. I can, maybe I'll just be a dealer and not use. That's the insanity of thinking what actually is false being true. Today it's like my truth is I stay in the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. That helps me stay clean. My truth today is I work with newcomers. That's my truth today. I help people work through the steps. That's my truth. So that second step is helping me distinguish that. Now, that tells me that eventually I will get to that point. That doesn't come in your first 30, 60 day, folks. I'm sorry. Time. It takes time to get time. It took time for me to change. I lived a life of instant gratification. It's like I wanted that car right away. I wanted to be 5 years clean right away. I wanted to be cool right away, and I couldn't. That third step, we made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood Him. Yeah, it's like the old saying, you got 3 frogs on a log, they all decide to jump off. How many do you have on the log? 3. So what that tells me is a decision in my life is no good unless I take the action. So that step 3 was making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him. What does that mean? It means I have to take an active participation in my recovery. That means I take action by working steps 4 through 12. And realizing that my life and my will belongs to something bigger and better than me. We get to that 4th step, and it's like we talk about the 4th step. You know, I had this moment of clarity about 2 weeks ago. Now, there'll probably be the people who have been here before me and longer than me, they go, dude, we knew this a long time ago. I'm a little bit slower than some people. I'm sorry. You know, it's like I came to this moment of clarity that told me, you know, why are we afraid to look at that 4th step? And to me, the thought that came to me was, the reason we are afraid to look at that 4th step is because if I've lived my life in denial, and I've lied to myself for so long as to how the piece of crap I really was, that 4th step is going to show me the piece of crap I really was. And that's the fear. I don't want to see the piece of crap I was. And so that's what I push off. And it's like, when that came to me, it's like, my God, that's true. I would put it off because I don't want to look at how bad I was. I had this idea in my head, you know, and we all do that sometimes, you know, thinking, well, it wasn't that bad. You know, I was just unlucky, you know, that insane thinking again. And so I try it one more time, you know. It's like, so it's like I had to learn to accept how my life was and who I really was. Because the hope in that message is we look at the piece of crap we really are and we change. That's the hope. That's the hope in the steps, that we don't have to be that person any longer. And the steps is what makes it possible for me to make that change. I had to look at my resentments. And I think the 4th step is really, for me, boiling it down, comes down to looking at why I had those resentments, what was it about me, and developing that list of character defects. Looking at my relationships, how I tried to control them, and looking at my fears. And again, my part in it, those character defects. So that 4th step really sets up 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So, you know, I made that list of people I had those resentments with. Now, this was prior all to this little flat book we have, you know. Now, you know, it's like we were just old school where you just wrote out all these people, you know, why I was mad at them, what they did, you know. And it's like, yeah, Charles, I can do that, you know. I can write out this list. That's real easy. I can tell you what they did. And, you know, and then it's like, so I would get those 3 columns together, and then it's like, okay, I'm done, right? He's like, oh, no. Now you got to go each one of them and tell me your part in it and how it affected you. What do you mean, my part in it? You see, I've been a victim all my life. It was never my fault. You know, it wasn't my fault that my wife finally got sick and tired of my ass going out for milk and eggs and coming back a week later strung out. It wasn't my fault. She shouldn't have trusted me with money. She knew me. You know, she knew what I was, you know, but I had to look at my part in it. And that's, again, it's like, if I'm having trouble looking at my part in it, what I've learned to do in sponsoring guys in Narcotics Anonymous is, if we have trouble with the step, we got to back it down to the step where the problem really is. Okay? So if I had trouble looking at this here, and I things, it's like, well, have I really made a decision to turn my will and my life over to care of God? Which means I've got to do that 4th step. Yeah, I made that decision. I'm doing it. Well, then, have you really come to believe that he can change you? Yeah. Do you really admit that you're powerless? Oh, you know. And sometimes it sort of stops at different steps. But if I'm having struggles, I can always start backing it down to where where the problem really lies, and then from there, fix it and move forward. Guys I sponsor, they know they'll come to me with their problems, and I'll sit there and I'll listen to their problems. I'll give them 5 minutes, maybe 10. And it's like, okay, what's the solution? Because Narcotics Anonymous and the 12 steps is about solving the problem, about fixing me, fixing my head, fixing the way I see things, and fixing the choices I make in life. So I list my part in all this and how it affected me. And then I looked at my relationships, and I looked at my fears. You know, that fear of abandonment, that fear of failure. And, well, it wasn't really the fear of failure, it was fear of success. Because I've been a failure, and I accepted that. I excel in failureship. But if I was successful, how would I handle it? I couldn't. I would sabotage it, so I'd go back to how I was feeling and what was comfortable to me. And so, you know, it's like I put all this together, you know, and then I take all this and I take it to my sponsor, and we go over the 5th step. That 5th step is about integrity, about finding out who I really am and sharing it with another addict. I like in the basic text where it talks about how, no, actually it's in How It Works and Why, how some addicts will justify not doing their 5th step with another addict verbally because God already knows what I did. God knows what I did. He knows that, you know, you did this. He knows those times when you were strung out, that you did things that made you feel less than a man. He knows those times you strong-armed robbed people, those times you beat your kids. He knows all that, so why do I have to say it? Because Charles would say, that's because that's not what the step says. He says, the step says we admit it to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So I've got to admit to God, to myself, and to another individual. And it was really interesting because when I did my 5th step, you know, I was telling Charles basically my story. You know, this happened, you know, talk about these resentments. And the interesting part was, you know, when I got to these things in my life that I did when I was using to get dope that made me feel less than a man, you know, I got real quiet. And I didn't want Charles to hear some of the things I had to do to get dope, you know. And Charles would go, I'm sorry, Mike, I didn't hear you. Really, Charles? Okay, I did this. He said, I still didn't hear you. I said, okay, God damn it, I did this. You know, and we went through it. But the thing was, you know, when I did those things that made me feel like a man, you know, those times when the guy wouldn't pay you your money for dope, you went and you stuck a gun in his face saying, give me my money or I'm going to beat the hell out of you. You know, I was real tough about that. And after I was done, Charles said, Mike, I didn't have you tell me all that stuff out loud to embarrass you. The reason you did it was so you could look at it, see it, and be prepared for God to remove it out of your life. You know, I understand that now. That's why I have to do that. So I can see my real self. And I can be prepared for God to remove it out of my life. And to accept me for who I am. That 6th and 7th step, you know, making that look at my character defects. You know, us addicts want to say, well, I don't have any character defects, man. You know, I might steal, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there. I lie a little bit, but who doesn't lie? You know, I had a real problem when I got here with honesty as far as stealing. You know, just typical from the street type of guy. And so Charles would be like, okay, Mike, you know, you got to quit stealing, man. You're going to go back to prison. You're going to go back to jail. They're going to violate you. Okay, Charles, I need to quit. I know that. It's like, okay, I want you to, every day when you get up, I want you to pray to be as honest as you can be and not steal. So it's like, okay, I can do that. Every day I'd get up and, you know, I'd be like, God, help me stay as honest as I can be. Now, I know what everybody's thinking because you're an addict like I am. I'd go to the gas station, you know, and I was just stealing cigarettes or Cokes or things like that, you know. Things I could buy, I just didn't want to buy it. I wanted to steal it. I'd like that rush. And I'd go, Charles, he'd go, did you steal today? I go, yeah, man. I stole a pack of cigarettes. But I was as honest as I could be. That rationalization. He goes, Mike, okay, I see I got to change my strategy with you. Now what I want you to do is every day ask God to keep you honest. Boom, period, end of sentence. Alcohol is a drug. Boom, period, end of sentence. These traditions are not negotiable. Boom, end of sentence, period. Be as honest. Just pray to be honest. So what happens, though, in that process, and I think this is what happens with that 7th step of asking God to remove these character defects from me, is I've got to start living the action of what I don't want. So in other words, if I don't want to if I don't want to be dishonest, I got to start practicing an honest life. And what happened in my life then was there'd be times when I would, you're standing in line, pay for some gas, and there's this, all the cigarettes were out front, they weren't behind the little glass thing and things like that, So it's like I'd be standing there and it'd be like, and it's like, go ahead, man, just grab you a pack. The miracle and the cool thing about recovery is all of a sudden this little voice in my head goes, do you really want to steal that? Damn it. Where'd that come from? Now, I'll be honest with you, there were days when I still stole it, but it's like I felt like crap afterwards. But it's like every time it's like there's that little voice, do you want to steal it or not? And we all know what it's like, man. It's like if you've been around here for a while and you got that little voice in your head said, go ahead and get high. I can guarantee you there was another one in there that said, do you really want to do it? And I know that when the desire of staying clean is greater than the desire of getting loaded, we stay clean in Narcotics Anonymous. That's how it works with me. My sponsor's favorite line, and I thought, my God, I thought this guy was like walk on water, intelligent. He would say these things and be like, wow, when the pain of doing is greater than the pain of not doing it, you don't do it. You know what that sneaky bastard did was I'm reading in the basic text, and it says right there in the first step, when the pain of using is greater than the pain of not using, you don't use. It's like, so he didn't make it up, And I have no idea to this day whether he's the one who started the 12SODMF or if it came before him. I don't care because it works, Nothing in Narcotics Anonymous is original. We hear things and we steal it, and I say it enough and it becomes mine. So what happened, though, when I started working that 6th and 7th step, I had things like self-esteem, fear of abandonment, that failure. You see, I had that self-esteem, which came from the resentment with my father, because when I was maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, my dad, helping my dad work outside, he'd just get frustrated with me, and he said, Mike, you are worthless and tits on a board. Why don't you just stab me in the heart, Dad, and tell me I'm worthless? That's self-esteem. That fear of abandonment. My mom and dad would be arguing about, whatever couples do, and they would, I'm leaving you, and Mike, you got to make a decision who you want to stay with. It's like, I love both of you. I don't want to leave either one of you. That fear of abandonment. That opportunity comes when I learn how to be a man in Narcotics Anonymous. And again, this goes back to that 7th step. It's like when I work with my sponsees on that 7th step, I don't tell them, okay, I want, here's your character defects like ego, dishonesty, whatever it might be. Don't ask God to remove it. I know that's what the step says. What I tell them to do is look at what's the opposite. If you're angry, is it compassion? Then you ask God to put compassion in your life, and then you start living a life of compassion. And if I start doing that, the anger's gone. So what I really believe, that physics exists, that things don't exist in a vacuum. If if anger's out of my life, there has to be something to take its place. So if I live a life of compassion towards others, that anger dissipates. If I learn an attitude of humility and humbleness, that doesn't mean that I'm less than you or greater than you. It just means I am me and I am okay with that. Then ego's gone. You know? If I'm honest with what I'm thinking and what I'm doing, the dishonesty goes away. Now, you know, it's real easy. I mean, to learn how to do this thing will take you maybe 30, 60 days at the very, very most. It takes years and years and years to learn how to do it, not what to do. You know, a lot of trial and errors. But what happened was, I had this little house, I had this car, you know, I had me a job, you know, at 6 months clean, and so I'm going through that 6 and 7 step about the self-esteem and abandonment, you know, and things like that. And all of a sudden, I get fired from my job. Because I can't afford to, you know, I lose the job, I lose the house. I lived in my car for 90 days at Narcotics Anonymous. Clean. You see, there was an excuse. Well, I got high because of this. You know, I don't know how many meetings I sit in, and it's like, all I'm hearing are excuses as to why we get high. I haven't heard a valid one yet. So I was living in my car with no money, you know, no way to eat. And the amazing thing is, when I look back at those days, I always had enough gas to go to meetings. I always found there's always seemed to be a way that I got fed at least once a day. And I only slept in my car when my ego was too big to tell somebody, I don't have any place to sleep, can I crash on your couch? So to me, life came into me, and it taught me how those character defects don't have to control me today. Because I've learned today, I am not my car, I am not my house, I'm not the woman on my arm. I'm not you, I'm me. You know, I don't sit in meetings at Narcotics Anonymous today like when I was new. I used to sit in a meeting, you know, never been exposed to Narcotics Anonymous. I would sit in meetings, you know, I'd have like 30, 60 days clean with these guys who had like 2 weeks clean. You know, these chronic relapsers who've been in for years and out for years. And they knew how to come in the meetings and talk cool. They looked cool. They talked at hip slick and cool. They knew the lingo. They knew how to sound good. And I would sit in the meeting and say, how come am I so messed up in my life? And this guy's got it together at 14 days. You know, I'd ask my sponsor that. Anybody else relate to that? You know, it's like, how is that happening, Charles? He'd say, Mike, you got to quit comparing your insides to their outsides. Now, isn't that what happens on social media today? I mean, if on social media you look at people's lives, man, they have got it all together. You know, we don't know the real story going on behind the keyboard. You know, and how often do we want to sit there and say, man, my life is all messed up. Look how well this person's doing. Today, I am okay with who I am. I am okay with where I am. You see, my recovery is not based upon you. My recovery is based upon me and the actions and the choices I make. I am happy with who I am today. I'm confident with who I am today. And I'm okay with who I am today. If you can't look in the mirror and say that, then get with your sponsor. We transitioned from there to the 8th and 9th step, you know, those amends, all these people I'd harmed. Now, you know, it's like, there were a lot of those amends, you know, the unknown drug dealer I ripped off. The, you know, tons of things I stole from people. I just didn't know who they were. You know, we just sort of categorized them and put them into a lump sum. All the women I slept with, not even knowing their names, you know, sort of lumped them together. Then we actually make a list of all these people I know that I had harmed, like my kids, my ex-wife, brother-in-law, he's in jail. I break into his house, rip him off. I make that list, and I got to go back and I got to make amends for that. That is not for Mike to go back to these people and say, I'm sorry. It is for Mike to go back to these people and say, what I did was wrong, and I won't do it again. How do you tell a child? You see, my youngest at that time, when I left the house, was probably 2 years old, and the oldest was about 7 or 8 years old. How do you go back to those children and say, Daddy was a fucking monster? Because I was. When I would come home after a long run, those kids didn't know what was going to come through that door. Whether I was still on that high, or I was crashing hard and I was an animal. Those times when, I'm coming home at 6:30 in the morning, just beat up and tired and sick, and all I want to do is crash. And my little girl is awake crying because she wants to eat, and there's nothing in the house to eat because I took the money. And she's crying. And what do? I say, well, if you're crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. The same thing I heard when I was a kid. And I would take my belt and I would beat her. That's the monster I was. I don't say these things to make me look good. I don't say these things to try to say, wow, that's terrible. I don't want you to think that of me. I say these things because it's my story of how I was when I got here. How do you go back to that girl and tell her, Daddy was wrong? And Charles said, that's what you do. So I took my daughter and I said, Daddy was wrong for beating you. And Daddy won't do it again. And the miracle happens when that little girl, with her little chip tooth smile because I busted a belt across her tooth, she looks up at me and she says, Daddy, I love you. That's the miracle of Narcotics Anonymous. That's the miracle of the steps. That's what happens when I stay clean. I experience miracles in my life. I learn from the amends to go back to these people. The adults that I'd harmed, Charles would tell me the instructions. You go back and you tell them what you did, you were wrong, and you were not going to do it again. And then you're to ask them if they have anything to say to you. Okay, I can do that. He said, but you ask them that and you shut up. Don't rationalize it. Don't justify it. You let them speak what's on their mind. And when they're done, you say, thank you for telling me that. And you leave. That's real hard to sit in that seat and allow somebody to tell you exactly what they think of you, to tell you of the person that you was and how you made them feel, and be able to sit there and take it without rationalizing and justifying, because that's what we want to do. I want to rationalize it away so I don't feel like this. And that's what we do when we're new. When we come in here new, I come in here with guilt and shame and remorse. So what do I want to do? Right away, I want to go out and make all these amends and tell people I'm sorry, without even knowing what I'm apologizing for or why I'm apologizing and what character defect it was, So it's like, that was a growing period of my life. That was a growing period of my recovery. And it's like, during that time, all of a sudden I start getting a job again. I start making my living again, being able to support myself. I can remember a time in recovery. During that time, I was homeless. And this is how meetings work in my life. And this is how a sponsor worked in my life. I pulled him aside at the time and I said, I don't have any food and I'm really fucking hungry. He said, why are you telling me? you go into that meeting and you tell them what's going on in your life. I can't do that, man. I'm pride. I got pride. I got to go into that meeting like, yeah, everything's fine, man. Yeah, I'm fine, man. I'm good. I can't tell them I'm hurting. But I did that night. And what happened was, after the meeting, people came up to me. They gave me a hug. Some people gave me $1. Some people gave me like $3 or $4. And it felt weird because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to manipulate anybody into giving me money. I was just going in there to say, this is what's going on in my life. And I don't know what to do. I need help. And it's like some of them, would do that for me. And one guy said, you know what? Come crash on my couch. I've got some trees that need trimming. I got some grass that needs to be cut. You're not getting a free ride, but you can earn it. Okay, I can do that. That's the experience I get in Narcotics Anonymous in meetings when I go in there honestly and tell them what's going on in my life. When I lay it out like it is. For the first 6 months, I take it back, it was probably the first year or so, of my recovery, they used to call me Wham Wham, because I would come into meetings and whine. This is going on in my life. I wanted to go out with this girl. She said, no. Oh, no. This guy, he'd just bust my chops over that Wham Wham mic, But it's like, it's like Charles just kept telling me to do it because he said, you're staying honest. You're staying real with who you are. And that is what will keep you clean. So when I go to meetings today and I hear people say, everything in me just wants to get high today. Or my life is falling apart and I don't know what to do. I love that because somebody's getting real and I accept it. And I can help that. The steps after 9, are what they call those maintenance steps, that 10th step. I love that pamphlet about a new way of living or living the program or whatever it's called. I forget the name of it right now. But it's like a new look, I think it is. It's sort of that daily reminder to look at my day and what's going on. And that's really important for me because sometimes I want to get so caught up with everything, I don't want to look at my daily life. What did I do wrong today? Was I selfish? Was I self-centered? Was I dishonest? Blah, blah, blah. But the neat thing about it was, it has you start looking at the good things I did in my life today. So I'm realizing that I'm not the piece of crap because I was self-centered here. I also took a newcomer to coffee and bought him a dinner or something. I'm learning how to be a different person. That 11th step about learning to be in this contact with this spiritual being of me. To me, the universe is my God. That's how I see things today. That 12th step after having practiced these principles in all my affairs. What are these principles? Honesty, hope, faith, caring, love, integrity. Those type of principles I'm learning to live in my life today. How do I do that? I do that by, at 6 years clean, having a nephew who was diagnosed with Alport's disease, which is a kidney disease, ever since he was a kid. Finally got up to a point where he either had to have a kidney transplant or go on dialysis the rest of his life. So I step up and I do the blood test and I match. Now the decision, do I give him a kidney or not? It's like he was just about to turn 21, still living the life, partying and things like that. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to give this kidney to somebody who's not going to take care of it. I've only got 2. And if I give one and the other one goes bad, after thinking about it and meditating on it, it's like everything in life and everything in recovery, it's like when a newcomer comes up to me and says, hey, can I borrow $50 from you? If I cannot give you $50, I do not loan it. If I can't give him this kidney, I can't loan it to him. So I gave the kidney to him. Now, it's like, went through the surgery, and, after surgery, of course, it's been the only time in my recovery where I used narcotics, and that was in the hospital when I was on a morphine drip. And I can remember to this day, with the narcotics they were putting in my body, of me going through mentally saying, I don't want to go back to where I came from. I don't want to go back to where I came from. And I think that was one of the reasons why I was able to get through that, even though it felt so good. I knew where my life was going to go. You see, there is no denial in my life about, if I pick up today, where my life goes. If you don't have that clarity in your mind, what happens when we pick up, then I would get real honest real quick. If I pick up, I go right back to prison. It might be tomorrow or next week, but I'm going back there. I'm going to lose everything I have. That is fact in my life. There is no denial in my life knowing that. I learned to accept things that go on in my life today. At 16 years clean, 15 years clean, I lost my father to lung cancer. And this is one of these spiritual experiences I've had in recovery. I go over to see him at night, it's like, we had dinner, and, this is the guy who told me I was worthless. This is the guy who, when I was just 3 years old, walked across some hot coals, who, as I was crying because my feet were burned, and my mom was taking care of me, hitting me in the back of the head saying, Mike, big boys don't cry. Big boys don't cry. This is the same man, all these years later, who I learned to love, who I learned to respect, because I was able to forgive him. It was not about him forgiving me. It was about me forgiving him. And, it was like I kissed him on top of the head, said, Pops, I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow. And it was really weird, because I go home and I go to bed, and I fall asleep, and it was almost as if I wasn't asleep. My dad was right there. He's like, Mike, everything is okay. I'm okay now. You take care of your mother. And it's like, right after that, the phone rings, and my brother's on the other line saying, Dad's passed. How fucking weird is that? And so again, because of the fellowship and because of the steps and because of the program, I learned to keep my word today. I took care of my mom. I stepped up. She started going through dementia. Couldn't live on her own. I buy the house. I move in with my mom. I live upstairs. She lives downstairs. She's going through dementia. She didn't know if I was Mike, or if I'm my brother Mark, or if I was my dad Pat. I'd come home from work and she'd have 4 or 5 place settings set. Are the kids coming home tonight, Pat? It's like, no, I think it's just going to be me and you tonight. I learned some compassion. I learned how to care. It's like those times when she was so confused about where she was at and just wanted to go home. I would put her in the car with her dog, and we would drive around the city for about 5 minutes and take her right back home. And say, well, here, we're home now. And she said, oh, good. I liked it here. It's like learning to be selfish. And now I will admit to you, there were times in my life it's like, I want to go out and do things. I want to be able to live a life. And once in a while I got that opportunity, to go hang out with friends at a function or something. And it'd be like, I'd be hanging out with friends, and it'd be like midnight, my phone would ring. It'd be my mom is like, hello, Mike? It's midnight, you better get home. It's as if she was seeing me at being 15 years old again, There was a time I went out, and it's like she didn't want me to go out. I come home, she locked me out of the house. So I had to go around back and throw a ladder up, climb in through the top window, and come in, go downstairs, and she act like everything was okay. It's like, it's just things that I learned to deal with. The compassion that I had and the caring for another individual is when I was able to lay in bed with her that last night. It was almost like the full circle. When I was born, she held me on her belly. She loved me. At least that's what I'm envisioning, She loved me. She cared for me. And that night, I was able to lay in that bed with her, rub her head, to say, Mom, it's okay. It's okay to go. And it's amazing that, and if you ever dealt with people who had that dementia or whatever, at that point of her life, everything all of a sudden became clear. She knew who I was. She knew where she was going. And to lay there as she took that last breath. I could not do that if I wasn't prepared through the steps and through the fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. I would go to meetings afterwards and tell them my heart's breaking. It's that final abandonment that I finally got through. Yeah, I sure miss the hell out of her. I miss my dad. But you know what? Life goes on, dude. You keep moving forward. Just because they're gone doesn't mean I have to forget them. So I've learned that maybe I'm doing a little bit better than I thought I was. Maybe sometimes that's what I got to do in life. When things seem out of place and I seem out of kilter, all I got to do is stop and make a gratitude list. Look at how good things are today. My sponsees know. It's like they're calling me, whining about this. This is going on. The old lady's on my ass. I want to go fishing. She wants me to fix the car. No. It's like, you know what I'm going to ask you to do, don't you? Yes, I've already done it. Write a gratitude list. That's right. That gratitude list puts me back at square zero and makes me see how good life is today. I saw something really interesting the other day. They were talking about elephants. When an elephant is born, he weighs about 200, 250 pounds. Imagine that coming out. But the thing was, he was talking about elephants, it's like they can take an elephant when it's young like that, within a few months. They tie a rope to it, tie it to a stake in the ground, and it will never stray. Never stray. It grows up to full size. You tie a rope to it, you tie that rope to a stake in the ground, and it won't leave. Now, we're talking about a 12 to 14,000 pound animal. It will not leave that stake in the ground. That is recovery. The addiction is that stake in the ground, holding me down, saying, you are not going to leave. You are going to stay right here. You're going to endure this misery. You're going to endure this pain. But I'm here to tell you tonight, you are much stronger than that stake in the ground. We are much stronger than that stake in the ground. And that's how we do it. That's why the steps say we, because we can do this. We can do this together. What I can't do by myself, we can do together. We can pull that stake out of the ground and be free and live life. And that's what life is all about today. I usually end with, when my home group, I usually end up saying something like, if nobody's told you they love you today, it's because you're an asshole. So if nobody's told you they love you today, maybe don't be one, and they will. Thank you for letting me share.